Greetings, friends, and welcome to Voice from the Podcast. This is our Blake 7 Federation's Most Wanted sequel, sidequel, side adjacent, whatever we want to call it, after party show, where I call back friends from off the podcast who have another deeper Blake 7 interest or association that I want to scratch a little bit more into. And I'm joined again today by Louella Richardson and Neil Shearer, the masterminds behind the Vindictus sequel Blake 7 book. Which I'm holding up, which you can't see because we're on audio. Guys, thanks for coming back. How you doing?
Thanks for having us.
Good. Thank you for having us back.
Brilliant. And I mean, right, I'm going to launch straight in with the questions that are burning away on my little brain. Louella, as you said on the previous podcast, you're over in America. Neil, you're over here in the UK. How did this magic partnership form?
Well, actually, we were in a lot of the same Doctor Who groups and some Blake 7 groups. And it was just one of those things, especially, I think it was more in a Doctor Who group. And, there are various little, I won't call them arguments, but discussions that come up. And we kept ending up on the same side and kind of having the same opinions and on the same side of fights and stuff. So, yeah, we just ended up being friends on Facebook. And immediately started launching into discussing all sorts of Doctor Who stuff. And one of the first things Neil asked me was, "Are you a fan of Blake 7? Do you like Blake 7?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I am." And then it just went off into really just your typical fan discussions about favorite episodes. And of course, we got into, what do you think happened after? Would you want to see a reboot? Would you want to see a continuation? And would you want to see? And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Wow, that's brilliant.
What she said, I guess. But I think that what became apparent to both of us was that we didn't feel that any of the attempts at writing something plausible had hit the mark for us. So or things that had been published out there. So we started to chuck ideas together, some random stuff at times, and that's how it started with just kind of being on having the same kind of viewpoints. I guess more kind of, I mean, it's odd, isn't it, in the modern world with tech, but I use the word friendship, I guess most friendships start from being on a similar page with someone, don't they? So it's kind of just a modern way of that, I suppose.
Absolutely. So did the writing journey start with the post sort of Gouda Prime concept, or did you do something else first?
No, that's where it started.
I mean, really, it wasn't initially going to be, we didn't sit down and say, "Oh, we're going to write a book. Let's come up with something." I mean, again, it was like not being happy with or agreeing with what had been done afterwards. I remember because I had really never read, I'd never read Aftermath. So Neil was like, "Oh, you ought to get it and read it." And thanks for that. But just to get an idea of what was going on after. And honestly, it was almost like the fantasy, well, if we could have any sort of continuation, what would we want to see? And it was like, well, this would be cool, and what kind of characters would we have? And it really wasn't intended to be a book. And we just started to develop this really detailed, all these characters, all these ideas. And it's Neil's fault.
It was weird, wasn't it? We were just coming up with these bizarre names and characters and concepts and just, and then this could happen and this could happen. And then we started, let's write a little story, a short story. And then the short story, we wrote the first bit, and then, what happens then? And then the first bit became the second bit. And then, what happened? And then the second bit became the third bit. And before you knew it, you had this blurb of 90,000 words. It's going, where the hell did this come from? So it was obviously all kind of stacked there, loitering in both of our minds somewhere in the back of our minds. It was there, this amorphous thing suddenly developed and became a story, I guess. So yeah, it's strange how it kind of it grew a life of its own. Would that be fair, Louella, do you think?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was, well, it just, we kept coming up with more ideas and more ideas. And then Neil was the one like, you want to try to write it down? And at first I was like, hell no. I was way too intimidated, especially given, I'm an American. And I was like, maybe an American shouldn't be, tackling this really iconic UK property. But yeah, we just had so many ideas. It's like, I think we have to do something with it.
What became Vindictus, it sounds like then, was boiling and actually bubbling away for quite some time then.
Maybe somewhere in my memory, in my brain, in my imagination, something was bubbling away. But I think we always looked at what could be believable. I mean, I think in our previous chat, I used the word believable quite a lot, and I like things to be believable. So we did a lot of rewatching of certain episodes. We wanted to make sure that it sat in the existing universe quite neatly and nicely. We didn't want to break any canon, as you'd call it. We wanted to continue the story as was, with a large enough gap to make anything that may or may not be in people's minds, that may or may not have happened. There's a 25, 30-year gap between Blake, the episode, and our story. So yeah, you can have whatever you want to imagine happen within there, but you just end up with our story at the end.
Absolutely. And I suppose I really should have said at the beginning, giant screaming alarm bell, spoiler warning, because I am going to go specific on. For me as a reader, one of the things I really did like was that gap. I liked the fact that you did that. I thought that really worked. I love the idea of this aging villa and Tarrant living there on Galda Prime. I could imagine that. I could see it in my brain.
Could you smell where they were living?
Yeah. I always think about, I know it sounds an obvious thing, but when you're reading, how quickly does that image form in my mind or not? How quickly could I visually see that? And I could quite easily see this little squalor there kind of living in. And I kind of liked the development of their relationship as well. I thought you guys did a great job of. It didn't jar me in any way. I could believe them two together, and I like the fact that it wasn't necessarily the two people that you'd ever put together either, as a little continuation pair of them, but the fact that they had almost grown to respect each other's abilities.
I mean, we discussed the obvious, which of course was Avon.
Yeah,
is always the obvious, and it wasn't because we wanted to be hugely different. I mean, Louella might have a different view on this, but my view was, I don't want to write for Avon. I'm sorry, but because everyone latches onto that character so much. He's such a hugely well-known character, and everyone's got different views about that character and his journey throughout the 4 seasons of what were Blake 7. I just thought I don't want to touch that character. I want to leave that character where it was, and didn't want to bring the views and controversy that writing him might bring. He's so iconic.
Yeah.
That I guess what I'm saying is I was a bit of a coward. I didn't want to go there.
Well, and we also wanted to, because we both felt like, I did, that Villa always kind of got a crap deal in the show. I mean, I think we kind of wanted to, I think I may be talking for Neil, but I think Villa might be, for both of us, our very favorite character. And no, it's mine. And I don't know. I just wanted, I just wanted Villa to be better served sometime. I mean, he was always getting crapped on in that show. He was always the one, if you think about it, he was always right about everything. I mean, if they had listened to Villa 90% of the time, they wouldn't have had half their stuff happen. And then Tarrant was interesting. I think Tarrant was more Neil's idea. And I initially, because when I first watched it, I freaking hated Tarrant. I thought he was an absolute jerk. He reminded me of because I was 19 at the time, he reminded me of every overcompetent guy who was like hit on me in a club, just like, hey, I'm a space pilot, you know.
I'm now not going to be able to look at Tarrant other than dancing like you just did. I'm a space captain.
Yeah, I'm a space captain, baby. You know, I got actually the way we wrote him and the friendship with Villa, I got really attached to Tarrant. I really had a lot more. I don't know. And if you go back and watch it, he really is an incredibly heroic character. I think he's one of the most heroic characters in the whole series.
I heard someone say on something, or write on something, I can't remember where, that is Blake 7 the story of Villa?
Yeah. Discuss. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you don't know. It's one way of looking at it. With Tarrant, it's interesting you mentioned Tarrant. I mean, Tarrant was so well written and so well portrayed by Stephen Pacey. I think, you remember Stephen Pacey, he was meant to be playing a 35, 40-year-old, wasn't he? And he what was he, 23, 24, something
absolutely.
like that, I think. So he did a great job. And the writer and the actor did a great job of that character, because I think you weren't meant to like him.
No.
So a lot of people don't like him. So that means it worked. But I think Tarrant, underneath it all, is a heroic type character.
Yeah.
And I think, whatever he might say and be snide and whatever and be sharp, he would have always protecting the crew and always on this side. Even Avon, he was always on his side as well, really speaking, right till the very end, when he rushed in and, in Blake and running and Avon alerted him, he was always... So I think Tarrant gets a raw deal. And I think it's quite an interesting character to write for, and to write with that kind of passage of time that you mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
So what could have happened in them 25, 30 years could have happened. But you can still, hopefully he says, you can still hear and see the original Villa and Tarrant's within what we've written. You can still, there's still that edge of them. You can still see them acting like they're acting and being like they are in the book.
I think that's, for me, one of the always the litmus test with any of the myriad of sort of Blake 7 fan writings and stuff we've had over time, things like Afterlife, things like this stuff like that. For me, it's always like, when a character speaks, it's, can I hear Michael Keating saying that in my mind? Would that come out of his lips in that way? And I really loved it because I could imagine a Stephen Pacey as he is now delivering that dialogue as you say, like a 45, 50-year-old man delivering that. I liked their references to their age and the passage of time. That was great, and you definitely wrote Tarrant with kind of a reverence that I've not really come across. Again, I don't like to pick on anybody's pigs, but Afterlife, maybe he wasn't so much written with, other than to turn up and get briefly murdered. So that's why
by snow tigers. By snow tigers.
A known killer of men, snow tigers.
No snow tigers in our book.
No snow. But I turn a page, and what happens in your book? What happens to Tarrant? And I must admit, I genuinely didn't see that coming, because the way you'd written him, he was in this till the end. If anybody's life I was worrying for Villa. I thought, are they going to pull the ultimate rug out from under my feet and they're going to brutally murder Villa? And when that kind of happened, I don't know if you guys ever do this. Do you ever do something where you read a book and your brain can't kind of process it quick enough, so you end up going back again? I was like, no, what the hell? What? No, she didn't.
I've had messages from people that I don't know on Facebook that just mess with, you killed Tarrant. I was like, yeah. I think we wanted to, in Blake 7, there was always that edge that they weren't safe.
Absolutely.
They were always at risk. And that started way back with Gan, and his death. And then, of course, Blake and Jenna go missing. And then, of course, Callie dies and they lose the Liberator. And then they all get the shootout at the end. So we wanted to bring that element of risk, obvious risk into it.
Yeah.
And we discussed it quite a lot, didn't we, Louella? Were we going to do this?
So
how
who
are we gonna
proposed
do it?
this? Who do I need to point the fickle finger of blame at? Who said let's kill Tarrant?
I don't remember.
Well, done.
I'm okay. I initially I think I was the one who came out how he died. Again, I'm
Okay.
a horror fan. And yeah, I can't remember. I imagine I
You
probably
had to wind it back a bit from what you originally wrote.
yeah, I mean, you're talking about somebody who, sat and watched House of a Thousand Corpses and just giggled through it. So yeah, I'm probably a little bit more of a gore hound than Neil is. So yeah, it may have been a little bit more bloody stuff on the wall when I wrote it, and we toned it down a little bit. But I think, excuse me, a lot of it with Tarrant is like the Tarrant I always think of now, the way he's in my head is that scene where he makes everybody teleport off the Scorpio, when he's going to crash land it, he's going to take that thing, and that's badass. I mean, that's completely one of the most heroic things you ever see. Can imagine.
So get out of here, will you? There's no point both of us dying.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was kind of, I think, the Tarrant we latched onto.
Yeah.
And we wanted, obviously, if there was a death, we wanted it to be high stakes. We wanted it to be somebody people cared about. It punched you in the gut to demonstrate that this is dangerous stuff they're in. And
we wanted to create a sense of trepidation. This is a new bunch of disparate individuals. We wanted to create a little bit of sense of danger and mistrust and that kind of feel that the original had. So, what better way to do that than have one of the crew take out one of the crew? I think, in answer to the original question, I'm to blame for the Tarrant death. I'm the guy I came up with the let's kill Tarrant in the middle. Who killed Tarrant? That's going to be me.
Yeah, it's very South Park. You killed Tarrant.
I killed Tarrant. Yeah.
When I was describing the book to a friend, and I described it as it was needed and necessary to have that kind of death. And I think for the reasons you've kind of alluded to there, that it just gave a really stark reminder of that Blake Seven could pull the rug out from under your feet at any moment without warning. And so I certainly think you achieved that because it was damn well without warning. But it also gave me my favourite scene of the book nearly immediately afterwards, which I thought was absolutely excellent, was Villa's response to the news and him teleporting back to Tarrant's body, despite the risk, despite all that they were yelling at him. I found that for me, that was such a true representation of the real Villa that lives behind the facade for me, that the whole Villa routine, is an act. He's incredibly intelligent. He's incredibly resourceful. He is quite brave when he needs to be, and I found the fact that he would go down there to see his friend again, like that gun in hand, almost.
Yeah.
You had me. And I was quite like,
they've been together for 25, 30 years, however that life was. We just wanted to acknowledge that, doing that would have built a massive friendship and trust, and they would have been so close that he wouldn't just let it wash over him. He'd have to pay him reverence, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he didn't have too many people in his life. You think about it. And I've talked about one of the things that bothers me about the original is how everyone was just a lot of times just such a complete jerk to Villa for no apparent reason. I would have totally been hanging with him. I loved it. It was fun. I would have.
You had the drinks, happy days.
Sense of humor and sitting there making fun of the rest of the crew. But there were very few people that Villa. I mean, he kind of had that bond with Avon, and then we see. Avon's ready to space him when it's convenient for him. And that just, you could tell that was a knife in the heart to Villa, and he never got over that. So to have somebody, even if they kind of spar and argue like an old married couple, but to have somebody that's always been there when he's probably never had that in his life, that I think would mean something to Villa.
And another one I want to ask you about is you brought back the system.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
well done. Yeah, that was another fanboy tick done. How did that come about?
We needed a ship.
Mm, yeah.
And we love we as you know we love the Liberator, and so we weren't back there. It's as simple as that.
Plot device.
Yeah.
No, and I was always Redemption's one of my favorite episodes, and I was always completely fascinated with the system and the Altas, and I love that sort of thing, AI controlled universe. So yeah, I wanted them to come back.
And we've made them a little bit more creepy now. These altars, they're a
Yeah.
little bit more, there's a little bit more to them than there was.
A little bit more Borg. It was a bit, they were a bit, yeah. And one of the other things I wanted to ask you guys is there's a lot of cool little Easter eggs, drops, references, nods. Give me some of your favorites. What were you like? I've got to get in X.
I think there's some lines that we just stole and put them back in. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but we definitely kind of flipped the how they were from what they were presented in the original show to how they presented in the book.
And that was usually Neil. He's got an amazing memory for lines.
No, I haven't.
No, I mean, and so there would just be a moment where we knew a character was going to say something, and Neil would just remember this line, and we just do a variant of it with no real explanation, but it was, an echo, a callback to something that happened, and we knew, it's not going to ruin it for somebody who's not familiar with the show, but it's the hardcore fans are going to go like they'll immediately think back to the original episode.
If only I could remember some examples right now.
We'll save that for a future.
If only I could.
Podcast.
I need to go and read my own book.
Yeah, read your own book. Do some research before you come on a podcast. What are you doing? But the book kind of stops and ends. So does that mean we're getting a sequel?
Well, we've got two things going on at the minute. Well, one thing very front and center going on at the moment, and that is where we're going to make this into an audio.
Brilliant.
So Vindictus is going to be an audio, and we're in the throes of rewriting, editing it for that media. And we're casting now as well. So we're casting a load of people, some with quite a bit of experience. They won't be well known, but some people with quite a bit of experience in audios. And I don't know whether you know Chrissy Pashley. Chrissy Pashley is going to be producing it and putting it together for us. But we're in the throes of doing that, which is exciting, but a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then Louella and I are in the embryonic idea stage of what happens next. Novellas, we're currently kind of thinking short novella stories. Because Vindictus really, as we've gone and looked at doing it as an audio, splits into three parts. So it could be three novellas, really.
Okay.
So we're looking at that.
Brilliant.
And yeah, it's more manageable too, and just really thinking about for each novella there would be like a mission or an adventure for the crew to deal with, and it's a little less overwhelming than trying to write a book and bring it all together, and that way we get stuff out a little bit sooner too. Because it took us a year and a half to write Vindictus.
And then we can dream up some titles, So, like the first part of Vindictus is going to be called Prime Directive. So we get to think of some of those snappy episode titles. Then.
Brilliant. And you introduced quite a few new characters. Personal favourites. Who's your personal favourite of the new characters you introduced?
I think initially I thought it was going to be Samel, the mutoid, because again, horror fan, I love the mutoids, I love vampires. But yeah, I ended up, and this was a surprise, I really like Callan.
Okay.
It was one of those things, we thought he was going to be hard to write, we thought he was going to be kind of a stick in the mud, and we really I really liked him, and he took on a personality of his own. And we have one character kind of towards the end, Tavia. And she's kind of more, I think it's Neil's idea. We envisioned her as almost have like a Bronx or Brooklyn accent. So yeah, she's an interesting one.
Yeah, she's a tough cookie. My favorite one to write for actually was Enso, but kind of became Callan. Yeah, so it kind of grew that character as a kind of right-hand man, faithful second in command kind of thing to, of course, we haven't mentioned yet Lou Blake, who's the Blake in this story. Yeah. So who's Roger's cousin. So
yeah, I did enjoy Ensor. It was Ensor for me because it was I've got a bit of a soft spot for a character that you dislike, not because if it's a TV presentation, not because they're badly acted or badly written, it's because they are horrid. You know, and that was what I liked about him. He's just, you know,
there's nothing. There's not very much redeemable.
No, but it wasn't just that banality of evil bit with him though. It wasn't just he's stirring the pot and he's a bit of a villain. It was great. His drivers and his reasoning and his sort of.
We've got bios behind all of these characters and that.
Really?
You know,
okay.
Yeah, them bios
for the super special edition. Yeah.
Them bios are like 19-20 pages long. So
wow.
We know things about these characters that people don't know just now.
Oh God, I want a companion book. I want a dossier book. I've got a Bond dossier one down there.
Ensor's a sociopath. As simple as that.
And he's fun to write for. One of my favorite scenes to write was the scene on the when he takes over the ship, and it's very murdery. I like writing murder scenes a lot.
Well, I'm conscious, guys, of the evil Zoom clock is once again at our door. Thank you so much, Loads. That's been really enlightening, and I wish we had even more time to drill into it. So maybe we'll get you back again in a future one. But thanks for the audiobook exclusive. You heard it here first, guys. There's going to be an audio of Vindictus, and you know, keep your eyes out for those sequels. And if you haven't picked up a copy, why haven't you? Do. Thank you again, guys, for coming along.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for having us on.
Take care.